Hollee was joined in this beautiful two-spirit pipes joining ceremony. And she invited me to go, and I was able to write Love is Sacred from that. It was one of those odd, silencing experiences, life-changing.
So the actual English term Two-Spirit was created by a group of LGBT LMNOP Indigenous folks at a gathering outside Winnipeg in 1990.
The Two-Spirit people historically were revered and put into a position where they were held in high regard. They were listened to, they were seen, they were included. Their voice and their visibility was important.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back, everyone, to my armchair travel adventures. And I am so excited today because normally I travel or explore outside of Canada. But today I have the honor to really learn about the Two-Spirit traditions, the Indigenous culture within our own borders. And I am honored to speak today with Sharp and Hollee, who were two beautiful individuals that I had the pleasure of spending time with over the Easter weekend. Hollee was joined in this beautiful two-spirit pipes joining ceremony. And she invited me to go, and I was able to write Love is Sacred from that. It was one of those odd, silencing experiences, life-changing. And I'm just happy today to be able to have a conversation about that ceremony and about that experience and learn more about Indigenous culture. So today, let me welcome Sharp. Hello.
Hi there.
You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Ani bojo kwe segos kanagoa sharp Dopler Indigenous Newfoundland and Dunjaba. Jijalagi meshkwaki minwa Irish. Anishnaabi jin kauza nimiki makwa dodem. Nisho manotok shkabewis ogichida. Hi, my GST name is Sharp. I was born and raised in the beautiful island of Newfoundland. My people are the Sac Fox and Cherokee people, and as you can tell by my deep dark tan, my mother was Irish. My spirit name is Nimiki Makwa, and I'm Bear Clan. And I serve the people as a two-spirit carrier of ceremony, as a helper, and as a warrior. Miigwech.
Miigwech, miigwech. And Hollee, my sister, my newly joined wedded sister, how are you, sweetheart? You want to introduce yourself as well, Hollee?
Yes, bonjour, Moscow Gijigo Kwe Dijnakas, Namado Dem, Ajadena and Donjaba, Padawatamio Jibwe Nish Money Doagi Kwe. So, what I've just told to you is hello, my name is Red Sky Woman. It means new days or new beginnings. I'm from the Sturgeon clan, and that is an old teaching clan. I'm from the Kettle and Stony Point First Nation, which is basically between Sarnia, Ontario and London, Ontario. I'm a Potawatomi two-spirit woman, which means I'm a lesbian. And I wasn't always a lesbian, at least not lived openly as a lesbian, but I do now. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here. Miigwech.
Miigwech, miigwech. And let's start there. What does two-spirit mean in the Indigenous culture? Is it, because it could be used for both male and female? Is that true? Could you explain a little bit more what that means?
It's a complicated thing. So the actual English term two-spirit was created by a group of LGBT LMNOP Indigenous folks at a gathering outside Winnipeg in 1990. And it was created as they came together. They understood that within queer culture, often it was difficult for us as Indigenous people to have a space as Indigenous people. And so the term Two-Spirit was arrived at through a vision by a woman named Myra Laramie as a placeholder until we could reclaim all of the terms in our different languages that referred to people like us. And what they didn't expect was that it would take off and have a life of its own. And part of the challenge with the term, because it's been very widely embraced, is there's a lot of misunderstandings about it. People think because it's translated in English as two-spirit, that it means we have two spirits, a male spirit and a female spirit. Well, spirit doesn't have a gender. Niso it means so many other things, you know. And I had the great gift of sitting with Myra and understanding that vision, which I don't have permission to share, but it's so much more. It's so much more than sexuality. It's so much more than gender, because for us, those terms, agokwenene and Anishinaabemowin, is somebody like me, you know, assigned female at birth, but just as much male as female, if you believe in a binary, but I'm so much more than that. And so it was about our role in community and the gifts that we had to bring to community. And Hollee is so good at explaining those gifts that we have as two-spirit people, which overlay with the gifts of people who are LGBTQ element. Go, Hollee.
Sharp, that is so beautiful. And thank you for sharing history with me. And I will admit, there is things that I do not know. And, you know, and that's why we have conversations, and that's why we get to talk and embrace the things. And as we know more, as we learn more, we are able to change our conversation, change the dialogue, and embrace, right? Embrace. Well, thank you. And Hollee, do you want to add to what Sharp said in terms of some of those gifts that Two-Spirit bring?
Yes, the Two-Spirit people historically were revered and put into a position where they were held in high regard. They were listened to, they were seen, they were included. Their voice and their visibility was important. Because the fluidity that is inherent or natural to who we are, we're often the social workers, we're often the mediators, because we have such a wide perspective, given that we have this fluid ability to see perhaps both the female side and the male side. There's one thing about Indigenous people is we're not inherently rigid people. It's just not our way. It doesn't matter if you're heterosexual or not, or a two-spirit or not. We're such a fluid people naturally, and that is something that colonization has beat out of us, is knowing and understanding that it's okay to be fluid in your thoughts and your feelings and your understandings, and use the people that you have in your families and in your community as leaders, as visionaries, as healers, because that's who the Two-Spirit people are. And because our identity, our cultural and spiritual identity, our ceremonies were outlawed and banned once upon a time. And in many ways, they still are. And so I urge people to research, come sit with the people, talk with the people, be informed, because we are sacred and we are healers and we are visionaries and we are, you know, all so many great and wonderful things.
I'm so privileged. Yes, thank you. And could you talk about that ceremonies? How is the pipe ceremony different from a traditional, the Two-Spirit pipe ceremony different from a traditional joining ceremony in the Indigenous culture? Sharp, do you want to say? Isn't?
It isn't. I've done joinings for straight people the same as I've done with Hollee and Mills. It isn't different. Love is love. It doesn't matter what the configuration is. And so that was the thing, you know, to Holly's point about how we were understood as human beings. Our languages, many of our languages reflect that we were not as rigid about gender as the people who came here. because our pronouns are not male and female as a general rule. And I know this not because I am fluent in Anishinaabe, the language of the people whose teachings I carry, but because I have sat with language carriers and they've told me about it, that our pronouns were about animate and inanimate.
Mm.
So you, me, your father, and the tree would all have the same pronouns.
Interesting.
And this cup and this yurt would have a different pronoun, animate and inanimate. So we understood that. So there isn't a difference. Well, there was a difference. There was probably way more laughter and hijinks going on in this ceremony than there often is in a heterosexual ceremony. Nothing against the
True.
heterosexuals.
This is true.
True. Because it gets a little wilder.
I loved it. Oh my God. But let's start from the beginning of that day, that ceremony. And Sharp, you are right now in the Mongolian yurt that we had the start of the ceremony. And when I stepped in, I remember we were instructed to step in with our right foot. And you looked around that space, and there are all these little tokens. I can see them behind you. And they all had stories, and you could feel the presence. Can you tell a little bit more of the history of your yurt and how it came to be in Canada, please?
Oh, wow. A number of years ago, I worked with a friend of mine who is actually a retired OPP inspector. We had created a community group called Nigan Ahnabi, Looking Forward. And what we wanted to do was to make our culture as Indigenous people accessible to anybody who was interested. So my friend, the OPP inspector, got a grant. We set ourselves up, we did education, we provided ceremony, not in the with the idea of kind of like spiritual tourism, but people really want to know, they really want to understand. And so as part of it, for whatever reason, he heard about these yurts, went and had a look at it, loved the idea that it was circular, that it was insulated, a little bit easier to take care of than a teepee. Teepees don't belong in this territory. Not that Mongolian yurts belong in this territory, but whatever. So somehow he heard about it and he got this yurt. My lodge, well, at that point, it wasn't my lodge. It was my elder's lodge, and I was the firekeeper. We did ceremony for community. And then in Christmas of 2016, one of my elders, actually in 2016, I lost two key elders who had shared so many teachings with me. And a couple of months after that, my buddy whose place my lodge was, he was very close to my elder, Mayangan. And when that man died, his heart was broken up there. So he just said to me a couple of months after, he says, I can't do it. I can't do it anymore. It's too painful.
Mm.
And this is a white man who's an ally, who did like incredible things in community with us as Indigenous people. So the yurt moved here and we set it up and we built the lodge. There isn't a sweat lodge at the moment because the frame's been taken down. We're going to rebuild it shortly. But that's how the yurt got here. And people spontaneously leave some of these things. Like some of these things have been given to me personally by people in other contexts. I've got you were sitting over on one side. And like there.
Yes.
And that particular blanket was given to me by an HIV positive woman from BC at an HIV/AIDS conference to honor me for doing what I do. Other people have come for ceremony and they've left trinkets, and I was just explaining to somebody the other day about the padlocks that you guys left.
Oh, isn't that
But
beautiful? I love that.
we're not going to make a habit of the padlocks. The padlocks are heavy. They're going up in here, man. This thing's supposed to be mobile.
But is it customary, Sharp, to leave tokens of gratitude in the yurt? For example, there's a Vietnamese clothing behind you, and I know the blankets. And is it customary to leave tokens?
our people are a gifting people. And people are very struck, like what you described coming into the yurt, that feeling. It touches people not just emotionally, it touches people spiritually, and often they're moved to do that. Sometimes I accept the gifts and sometimes I don't. Because there's a finite amount of space in a yurt. Some of the things came with the yurt, like the bear hide that's behind me. But that particular thing about the Vietnam veterans, that belonged to my late elder, my Angin Jesus. He was a Vietnam veteran, just like my dad.
Right.
And to honor him and my dad, who this lodge, Kogabwe's lodge, is named after my dad now, since he passed away. So it's just a way of, I don't know. I think people do it as a mechanism to feel like they continue to be able to hold on to whatever it is that they've experienced here. Like there's a piece of me there, so I'm part of all of those good things.
And you feel it. There is an incredible power and energy in that yurt. And if I talk of it, I even right now, there are goosebumps coming through on my skin, just thinking about that space. It's a very sacred space. Well, I also wanted to talk about the most beautiful ceremonial clothing that I've seen. Hollee, your clothing, the ceremonial clothes were just gorgeous. And you were explaining before the ceremony about the design, especially on the sleeves, there were these beautiful designs. Can you talk a little bit more about the ceremonial clothes?
Yes, well, first I have to say that the regalia, both mine and Mills, was made by an Indigenous designer named Tracy Toulouse of Swirling Wind. So props to her. She's an absolutely amazing designer. I've seen her work in and around the community for a very long time, an amazing artist. And so when I had a conversation with her, because I'm not that talented,
your talents lie in other
I'm not a
directions.
seamstress. So when I contacted her, I explained to her that I was an Ojibwe woman. So I wanted my Ojibwe heritage represented with Ojibwe florals. So what you saw on the arm was Ojibwe florals applique. Also, I identified to her what my spirit colors are. And my spirit colors are used for a number of different reasons, but really for this, it was about saying, hi, I'm Hollee, because our colors are part of our identity, both here in this world and in the spirit world. So both here and in the spirit world, those colors help to identify us. So they're of great importance to our cultural and spiritual identity. And typically they're given at birth. However, I was much older when I got my colors. So those colors are to be worn in some form or fashion throughout our lifetime. You'll often see those things on many different styles of traditional regalia, those spirit colors. But also, if anybody had a quick glance, there was a sturgeon. There was a white sturgeon on the back of the regalia, and that represented that was representative of my clan, because I am from the Sturgeon clan. So when you look at traditional regalia, it's really like reading a story on clothing. We could read the regalia and know and understand who that person is and where they've come from. In my case, being Red Sky Woman, you'll see the sun colors. You'll see the clan represented as the sturgeon, the spirit colors, whatever they may be. You literally, if you know what you're looking at or for, you can identify somebody by their regalia. So that is both, again, for this world and the spirit world.
And can we talk a little bit about Mills? Her regalia, because that had colors as well. And I thought it was a really nice lesson that you shared with me about the 4 colors of man. Do you want to just mention that as well?
Well, it was important that certainly she matched me, of course, but
It's all
gotta
about
have
the style.
matching
Match, matchy, matchy.
and some indigibling, right? No, that is what you would typically find at any ceremony. Um, it is called a ribbon shirt, and the four races of men, the four colors were indicated here, and then the ribbon shirt, the small ribbons downward, right?
Right.
Um, so the teachings that I've had around the four races of men were those that were the original race, some of the original people to this world.
Right.
The white race, the black, the yellow, and the red nation. Um, Certainly, and I want to say this, certainly with various nations coming together in various types of relationships and intermarriage. I wouldn't say that's so absolute anymore, and that's okay because we are fluid people and we're welcoming of all. But it's really representative of what I know to be the four original to this world. So Mills, my wife, she identifies as an Afro-Indigenous woman. Certainly comes from a history of slavery. She knows that from the research. She carries the slave master's name. Um, the Indigenous side um, is through her grandparents, great grandparents from the Cherokee Nation. And quite frankly, that's been problematic for her. It's been problematic for a lot of people because of the colonial borders that we have and the number of documents that need to be presented. But for us, for ourselves, and as a couple, we try to decolonize. And so this joining ceremony was our way of decolonizing our lives together. The regalia is representative of decolonizing. And for Mills, and I don't want to speak to her entire story, but what I know from her as my wife is that was really for her about reclaiming and standing proud of her Indigenous heritage as much as she's very proud of her heritage on the other side, the Black history, though it's not always positive, right? So she's coming into her own as well. And I'm sure, Sharp, you can speak to that further. But it's all symbolic, it's all represented, it's all about being who we are.
Embracing who
That's
we are,
simple.
loving who we are.
Being who we are, right?
Yes.
Walking tall. You know, I'm a white passing Indigenous person. I don't have any white man's proof because of my family history. My family were Cherokee people who escaped the forced removals, who managed to escape that removal around the Great Lakes. And that's where the Sac Fox lineage comes in. But they pretended to be Black Dutch. That's why I have a Dutch last name. And because they had seen what had happened, right? Because the Cherokee people were one of the civilized tribes. They tried to assimilate as quickly as they could in hopes of avoiding pain and suffering. And it didn't save them. So as a white passing Indigenous person with no white man's proof, I like my bling, man. I love to dress in my regalia. I often will have, and I have on my body, I've got tattoos that have my clan, that Bear Clan, standing up and moving around. I've got a design on the back of my shirt, which is a tree with 3 different sets of bear paws, and it represents those bears that follow me around because that's such a huge part of my medicine. All of my life, those bears have been with me. There's a little black bear. She's kind of cute and friendly. There's a big, scarred, cranky grizzly bear. And then there's a white bear that keeps shifting. Sometimes it's a polar bear. Sometimes it's a spirit bear. Back and forth. And they've always been with me. And even my very Catholic Irish great grandmother, she saw that, because when she first held me, she said, "Oh, sure, she's a child of the angels."
Ooh.
And that was her understanding of those spirits that she saw around me.
Mhm.
So these are my colors, red and blue with the white and yellow. So I am both a fire keeper and a water carrier.
Mhm.
And I was struck by lightning about 14 or so years ago. So that white and yellow represents that the thunderers that I carry in my body.
And you live to tell the tale.
Well, and those elders told me that that was a gift, right? That when the
Mhm.
thunderers reach out and touch you and leave you mostly kind of unscathed, you carry that medicine in your body always, and it's a gift.
Yes.
And lightning struck people find one another in our communities. But it was also a wake-up call for me, because when I came into my culture, because I didn't grow up in my culture, didn't have the opportunity to grow up in my culture. And when I had the opportunity to learn more about it, and I had those wonderful Anishinaabe elders who embraced me and shared culture with me and shared teachings with me and have gotten me to here, I was doing my best to be everybody else's idea of what a good little Indian girl would be. So I wore the skirt to ceremony, and I tried to dance women's traditional. That was a gong show. And it just felt wrong, 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 wrong. But I didn't feel I could do anything else. I didn't feel I could push back, because I wanted to be a good Indigenous woman, because every cell in my body was crying out for it. And I didn't even know that's what it was crying out for. But it was not the path I'm supposed to dance.
Mm.
So the Thunderers, while I was staying with my elder at his camp for a powwow one evening, reached out and smacked me upside the head and say, "Hey, dummy, pay attention." And it was after that, after I got over some of the worst impacts, I changed my regalia and I started to embrace being a two-spirit warrior, being a warrior. So the style I dance now is what many people refer to as men's traditional, but it's not men's traditional. It's warrior style. It's the warrior stories.
Mhm.
And so even in that, Hollee talked about being colonized, right? Even in that, well, you know, I can either be women's traditional or I can be men's traditional. And so for many years, I have danced very strictly men's traditional. The only kind of feminine touch on my regalia is this beautiful necklace of white, yellow roses that my dad gave me. And I was horrified when he gave them to me, because they were such a woman's piece. And I went, what am I going to do with these? So I attached them to my breastplate in my regalia. And they kind of worked. And I've just come to the understanding that I need to make another change to my regalia. So I am replacing, I wear a leather apron when I dance, one front, one back. And I'm replacing the front leather apron with red bear print pattern. And I'm going to put jingles on it. It's going to be part jingle. My regalia, and I'm going to put jingles on my shirt.
Jingle pants. Get some jingle pants.
That'll chafe.
And
But-
is that part of embracing your two spirits?
Yep.
Person.
And the reality is that when I dance that out, there's going to be pushback,
I'm coming.
because they want one or the other, right?
Mm.
You let
I
me
love-
know. We're coming.
No, I support, and I this is all about embracing and loving and stepping into our own power. I applaud you for that, Sharp.